This is the Stine Seedcast. I'm your host, David Thompson. Join me as we visit with growers, agronomists, seed experts, and other industry professionals about seed, agronomy, and the business of farming. Hello, and welcome to the Stine Seedcast. I'm David Thompson, National Marketing and Sales Director for Stine Seed Company. Today, we welcome back to the show Stine National Soybean Technical Agronomist Tyler DuBay. Thanks for joining us, Tyler.
Thanks for having me, David.
So, on this episode, Tyler's here to talk about something new from Stine. We have a line of soybean blends that we're releasing just in time for the 2025 season. On this episode, we're going to explore what exactly a soybean blend is and the benefits that they can offer to grower customers. So, let's get started. So, Tyler, I know you've been a guest here on the Seedcast before, but, just for a level set, maybe remind us a little bit, tell us about yourself and some of your background quick, and then what you do here at Stine Seed Company.
So I have been in touch with Stine my whole life. Chuck Hansen, who runs our soybean division, was actually my hockey manager sporadically throughout my childhood, and I always was introduced into Stine. But, about 10 years ago, I took the leap of faith and joined the Stine research team and really had a good experience there, built a family. I consider Stine and everybody within it to be my family because I spend so much time and have so many experiences together with each other that, I left to go marry my wife. She lived over in Omaha because we really didn't have any footprint over there for research. And so I went over there and moved with her and married and been through big and small companies ever since. But about 2 years ago, I started my second tour of duty with Stine and not going to look back. So it's great to be back. What I do for Stine is I'm based over here in Tremont, Illinois. So that's kind of the heart of Illinois, north central part. I manage and control all the corn and soy elite plots here. So I kind of oversee all the locations, collect disease data and disease ratings. So anything you see in the catalog, that's part of my responsibility. But I also manage all the drone operations within the research function. So I wear quite a bit of hats, and I'm on my second tour of duty, is what I like to say.
Well, great, and we're glad to have you. And so what we're here to talk about today is, as I said at the top, we're talking about soybean blends. Now, I said that this is kind of a new thing for us for 2025, but I guess, just by way of history, the idea of soybean blends is not really a new concept. Is that fair to say?
That is extremely fair to say. So there is blends out in the market currently right now, but, like many other things, we like to say we were the first to do these blends. And for one reason or another, it never gained traction. We think as part of our responsibility, I don't think we did a great job broadcasting or teaching growers that we're pairing two high yielding performing beans together. And so, when we brought these up, people thought, we were covering up stuff or anything like that. But we don't launch anything that doesn't yield. And so by combining these blends together and bringing all these new blends through into the marketplace, we're actually bringing two high yielding beans together. And we actually, 20 years ago, we believed that these blends were some of our best performing stuff and our highest yielding performing stuff. So yeah, it is definitely not new.
And that's a good point. I think during the first, even back into the 1980s, I think when the concept of blends was first kind of making the rounds, to your point, I think it was kind of thought of as, well, whether real or imagined, I don't know if this is floor sweepings or this is kind of the leftover stuff, and which it never was in our case. But one of the things we're going to talk about here is how growers can identify what it is that's actually a part of the blend. But before we get to that, just to close the loop so everybody's clear on what it is we're doing here, tell me what it is when we talk about a soybean blend. What is a blend?
So blends are a combination of soybeans that we've brought through our elite testing program. Blends are a mixed bag. So when we take one blend or when we take one brand and we take another, we'll put them in the same exact bag, and they're being mixed for a purpose. The mix, mainly the driven purpose is continuously high yields. All these blends are combined at a 50-50 ratio within the bags. But our goal with all these blends and bringing these forward is we want to maintain yield. We want to provide a risk mitigation tool for every single grower. And then we also want to bring forth enhanced trait performances within every single bean that we actually have. And so by combining all these blends together, you're going to get a very high performing product.
So you mentioned there, as far as one of the potential benefits being obviously combining two high yielding sets of genetics into one, but you also touched on a few other things. So when we talk about the benefits of, an in-bag blend of two known genetics, what are some of the other, I guess, what's the characteristics that we looked at when we said, okay, let's combine a couple of different genetics here to make them a paired blend? What are the things we're trying to work with?
So a lot of the blends that we brought forward, we look at, different things like RM, they have to be the same relative maturity. They have to be somewhat the same height, right? So, well, I'll go back to the relative maturity part, but you don't want two way different maturing beans and have green beans out there when you're ready to combine, one specific bean. So we look at maturity, we look at yield, does it yield in the that's probably the first and foremost thing. But then also, we look at seed size, and then we also look at height and things like that, because you don't want a big tall bean and a big small bean in the same exact bag. That isn't too much aesthetically pleasing and could create some issues in the long run.
And is it true that then also in some cases you're looking at, addition to the yield component, you're looking at things that might be complementary from a disease resistance profile, or things, to try to mitigate certain situations that are going on in the field?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So last year in Northern Illinois, there's a bean out on the market right now. It's 29 EFO2. That has been extremely high performing, ever since it came through a couple years ago, and it's still in our portfolio currently. One of the things and one of the benefits that I use to kind of summarize the blends up is last year 29 EFO2 really was brought forward for high yielding purposes. The previous 2 years we had droughty conditions here within Iowa and Illinois. And so we didn't really have to deal with white mold or certain diseases that come with moisture. And so 29 EFO2 isn't so much of a great bean against its average rating within our catalog. And so we have this new blend, 28 EH100, where we're actually pairing 28 EH32 and 29 EFO2 together. The 28 EH32 is extremely high yielding. It did fantastic in our elite plots. It was about 107% in our yield trends, and 29 was even higher than that. And so having the 28 EH32 be really good against white mold and the 29 EFO2 paired together, you always have the advantage of yield potential there, because you don't know what's going to happen from year to year. You don't know what kind of environments are going to get introduced into these fields and these beans. And so having a blend together and having them be complementary and be synergistic with each other will only create you more yield and more profitability in the long run. Because if something comes in that's unforeseen and that 28 is really good against certain diseases more so than the 29, you'll maintain your yield component on there, and you'll still maintain your yield potential within that specific field. So there's significant benefits to blends, both from a yield perspective while also being a risk mitigation tool, which is why I initially started out mentioning that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's a great, almost kind of a way to diversify the portfolio in a sense, and sort of, as you said, the one factor we don't control is the weather, right? And so, by combining two things that maybe are complementary in the way they approach, then that might protect you from, when things go sideways from a weather environment situation. One of the other things I like is, I guess I look at it and think, for those guys who probably have maybe a little more diverse or a little more variable soils, and so they've got challenges in field. It seems like a blend would be a nice way to kind of address those situations where you've got even almost a microclimate situation within the same field where you're going to have a risk in some spots, but you got some high yield spots as well. So how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of these blends are complementary to each other. So, I'll give you an example. Some of the blends have a 3A phytophthora gene, while the other ones are susceptible. Some have a Peking gene and 88,788 blended together. So, I mean, just kind of to your point there, soils are very variable, right? In some fields you have high productive ground, and in some areas you have sandy timber ground. This blend would allow you a tool to cover all those acres within that same specific field. And I was actually in a meeting the other day. We have really great products, 30EH32 and 30EH23. It was actually a funny conversation because the ISR was saying, well, which one do I pick? Which one do I pick? I was like, well, it doesn't really matter because you can get this in a blend. So you don't even need to worry about which one's better than the others. I mean, you can get them together and have very high confidence that you're going to get the yield that you want. So, I mean, it makes conversations a lot easier, and people are really excited about it.
Yeah, especially in that case where you're really pairing two real high performing sets of genetics, which again, independent of each other, one might outperform the other in any given year. So you're sort of you're hedging your bet in a way to say, hey, let's do a blend, and then whichever one is better this year, at least I've got it, out there. And the other one is probably no slouch, but it's going to be, it's going to be right there with it.
Right.
So it sounds to me like when we talk about, the attributes of these blends, there's a lot of benefit to be had in potentially using a blended product. I guess the question I'd have is, out of that, are there certain situations a grower may be in where use of a blend would be the ideal use of a blend?
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to, my example in Northern Illinois. If you sit through some of the meetings in the wintertime, Iowa State just had their crop improvement meeting this year, where sometimes they have climatologists that come in and say, well, there's going to be an El Nino year, it's going to be a La Nina year. And, you don't really know, but you really want to use these tools because I'll give you another example. In Northern Illinois 2 years ago, we had a white mold outbreak as well. It's really important to know the historical aspect of your field, because 2 years ago, white mold showed up on people's farms that they didn't even know that they had white mold potential in their farms. Some people have owned farms for only 30 years, while 50 years ago, Del Monte and Jolly Green Giant and all those other giant vegetable producers were in the north central part of Illinois. And so, it's really important to look at specific soil types, certain situations, and know the historical aspect of your field, because then you could actually prescriptively put specific blends to cover yourself against those certain risks. It's kind of going towards that 29 EFO2 story I told earlier. If you know that you have a potential for white mold in that area, just in general, you don't know if you're going to get it or not, but you at least set yourself up for success and know that bean, if one of the beans get hit with white mold, the other one will compensate and complement each other and actually maintain that yield potential within your field.
Yeah, again, just a kind of a way to hedge your bets, I guess. So when we talk about these soybean blends, I guess, how is this concept and how is this product unique compared to other genetics that are on the marketplace today? How do they position against, things that growers might be able to get available from other companies?
Nobody's blending the beans that we're blending together right now. So, I mean, you have that first and foremost. You have our genetics that you can't compare to anybody else, our yield potential and the germplasm that we have brings way more advantage to anybody else. But if you use this soybean blends in a unique experience against one single, but I like crowdsourcing, I should say. I'm more of a crowdsourcing person. So, if you take Harry's analogy with a basketball team, right? If you do a 2-versus-1 on a basketball court, more times than not, if you have two people on a team, the one person that you're playing, if it's a 2v1, one person might get hot, but more than likely the two-person team that you're going to have playing in that basketball game is going to win because of the crowdsourcing effort that you have. And so if the beans that are out on the market right now that are not blended, you're somewhat taking a gamble of understanding what's going to happen within the environment. I like to use that Peking that I talked about earlier. If you just have one Peking bean on a single field, but you have variable soil types across your whole entire field, you are limiting yourself to a yield potential of that specific bean. If you put two of those beans on that same ground, you'll actually have a higher yield potential because they complement each other. It's a synergistic relationship. You also don't even have to worry about all the inputs and things like that. You can, even though you still have to keep them in the back of your mind, when you put contans or heads up for certain seed treatment against white mold or any other disease for that matter, you're costing yourself more money. And I know that contans is actually pretty expensive, and so this could actually be a cost effective approach for you at the forefront of selecting your products and what you're planting, because then if you have a strong performing bean against certain diseases, or you have a high yielding bean in certain areas, you'll always maintain your yield potential, and you'll end up being prosperous at the end of it. So I always like to take it from a crowdsourcing perspective, because two is way better than one.
Yep. Yep. That's a good analogy. So we're not going to go into exactly what the blend products are that we're offering, but just as an overview, I guess, Tyler, can you give us an idea, about how many of these blends Stine is planning on, and kind of the range of maturity that we're offering?
Yeah, so our blends vary from a 1-3. It's actually a different numbering system. So it's 13 EH 100, which is a mix of a 13 EH 62 and 15 EE 32, I believe is what it is, all the way to a 3-6, where we actually combine a 36 EH and a 37 EG. There's 8 total blends for 2025. They're all like RMs. There are certain things that differentiate each other with pubescence colors and different things like that people should be aware of, but that shouldn't have any impact on productivity on your ground. And yeah, some of them are brought forward with yield and IDC components involved in it. Some are brought forward with just straight super yielding beans, and then others, have certain third party aspects where, like I mentioned, the white mold thing. That's not the reason why we advanced it, but it's just one of the perks on top of it too.
Sure. And I guess we should note that, these blend products can be available across a wide range of our area, but, they are somewhat unique to certain conditioning facilities, because obviously to make the blend, you got to have a facility that had both the products to start with and had the right, compatible products. So they're in the system, but because of location, it might be that some are in different parts of the country than others. So as we kind of talk about, we've talked a lot about the blend products. I guess I'm curious as to, looking ahead to this coming summer and even beyond that, I guess, what do you see? What's on the horizon for Stine Soybean Research and our soybean lineup as it goes forward?
So our next bean products that are going to be coming out are listed as EJs. So we're making the jump from EH to EJ. Just like always in our Stine platform, they keep getting higher yielding potential. And the percentages keep getting higher. So just give you an example, the EJs this year that moved forward averaged about 107% yield trend, while the EHs last year averaged 105%. So I know within some of your conversations, David, you mentioned about the 2% yield gain every single time we bring a new generation forward. It's still maintaining that trend. There are some really good beans that are coming forward as EJs, but the ones I'm excited about is there's one 18 EJ that's coming forward with really good white mold and really good sudden death, as well as very high yield performance. So I'm really excited to keep track of that bean and see how well it goes in our PDP plots, but then also mainly in the elite trials too, and how it fights. So
Awesome.
because that's the mentality of Stine is, once you make it to the finish line, you're not done. So
uh,
you're not done whatsoever.
that's right. That's right. It just keeps on going. So as we kind of start to wrap up our conversation today, we talked about these blends, which I think is super exciting. Interested, to get them out and into farmers' hands. I think it's a great idea. How do you see this concept of blends as affecting farmers planning for the future, and how does it fit into their plans as you look to the next couple of years?
So I value context more than anything. And so, when we actually first started talking about these blends, I called Chuck and I asked him for context on historical aspects of blends that we've done and people's opinions internally. And what actually really surprised me is that Harry, he mentioned that Harry really likes blends. And if he had the option, he would actually blend beans together and not have a certain, how would you say it, not have a certain restriction. I'm not saying like put every single bean together, but at least provide the option to.
Yep.
And so that actually kind of got my mind turning, because that actually could be very advantageous with the way people operate and the way the industry operates now, because I could see it actually being somewhat of a prescriptive basis in the future. Because if you go, it's kind of like our yield maximizer program that we have going on right now with corn. You could talk to a farmer, work with a farmer, and be connected, and have the farmer understand the context of his ground. You can actually prescribe. I could foresee in the future we could be prescribing certain blends to certain farmers that want it, obviously. But then, they don't have to worry about certain things, kind of, like the risk mitigation aspect. You can create certain prescriptions for certain beans to be present and spread them over certain fields that have different experiences, and that would be way cost effective with lowering input costs, which are really crazy right now. But then also, allows you the choice and the knowledge to put certain stuff on your ground and really maintain that yield. Again, I go back to being offensive, right? I don't want to ever be like, oh, this is happens on my field, so I have to limit myself to this specific bean. It doesn't always have to be like that. You can say I have this and say, well, okay, I want this high yielding bean, but then I need this one to remedy if this shows up that I've seen in the past. So I mean, you can really take a very data driven or prescriptive approach to these blends and actually to the industry going forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear you say that, because I guess that was one of my thoughts as this kind of has made its way through. Is you hear people talk. I know for years there's been talk about even planting different varieties in the same field based on soil type or known conditions or situations. And sometimes because of how things work, we're lucky to get the one best product planted on the right field because of timing and weather and all the things that happen. But to me, this seems like a great way to say, hey, a blend might help you, sort of raise the tide in the areas that you need to raise it, and while still allowing you to capitalize on your best ground as well. So hopefully we see growers be able to adapt that and use it, like you said, almost like a prescriptive type approach.
Yeah, and it would get us to be connected too, because then our ISRs and our company can be more connected with them, understanding their fields and understanding what they've done in the past. It only creates more of a relationship driven
Yep. Yep.
combination than anything.
Absolutely. So I guess in closing, I guess the last question I'd have for you, Tyler, is we've talked all about these blend products. If you go out and talk to a grower today, I guess I'm curious, what's one thing you would like that grower to know and understand about this whole concept of Stine soybean blends as they're sitting there today thinking about planting for 2025 season? What's the one thing you'd like them to take away from that?
Yeah, what I want to know, or I want everybody to know, is that these beans have been carefully vetted through all of our process within the elite trials. They've proven themselves individually to be high yielding potential, great performing beans that handle all sorts of environments, because of our widely adaptive testing network. But as you put them together, the one thing I want everybody to know is that they're complementing each other. And so they're only complementing each other to bring more yield and more profitability for everybody. And so that's one of the main things I want everybody to know, is that we're not doing this to cover up any sort of issues or anything like that. We really want everybody to know that these are paired to get as much profit out of every single acre as possible for everybody.
Yep. Just like the Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan of the soybean world, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's dated me terribly.
Except the Scottie Pippen of old.
That's we won't use that because that dates me so badly that we won't possibly use that. But anyway, all right.
Hey, I was a Jordan kid.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Tyler, awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Seedcast and talking about Stine's new for 2025 soybean blends. As always, we appreciate all that you and the agronomy team do for Stine and for Stine's grower customers. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Stine Seedcast. To never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice. Have a question for our experts? Email asktheseedcast@stineseed.com to have your questions answered on a future episode. To learn more about Stine Seed Company, visit stineseed.com. And remember, Stine has yield.